I lost $8,000, my sister sobbed, begging for my help. When I refused, they left me on the desert road. Hours later, I arrived and fought back. I never thought my own parents would leave me stranded in the Nevada desert, but looking back, it was the wake-up call our family needed. My name is Morgan Hayes, 34 years old, and I've spent my entire life being invisible to the people who should have seen me most clearly. They had no idea who I really was or what I was capable of. That is, until the day they decided I wasn't worth bringing back from the desert. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, the steady one, the one who never caused trouble. My younger sister Allison, 5 years my junior, was the golden child who could do no wrong. When I brought home straight A, my parents would nod and say, "That's expected." When Allison managed to scrape by with C, there would be celebrations and ice cream and proud phone calls to relatives about her improvement. The pattern was established early and never wavered. I still remember my high school graduation. I was valedictorian, had received a partial scholarship to a state university, and had worked nights and weekends at a local cafe to save for college. My speech received a standing ovation from everyone except my own family. My father scrolled through his phone during my moment on stage, while my mother kept whispering to Allison about an upcoming shopping trip they had planned. Later, at the small gathering at our house, my academic achievements were brushed aside in favor of discussions about Allison's upcoming senior year and how she might try out for cheerleading. "Morgan always had it easy with school," my mother said to a neighbor who had congratulated me. "Allison has to work twice as hard for half the results, poor thing, that shows real character." College was a struggle of 60-hour weeks split between classes and multiple jobs. My parents had made it clear they wouldn't help me financially. "College is probably a waste for you anyway," my father had said. "You're just going to end up in some office job." 2 years later, when Allison decided she might want to try college, my parents drained their savings and took out a second mortgage to fund her education at an expensive private university. She dropped out after 3 semesters. The stark contrast in how we were treated wasn't just about money or attention. It was about value. In their eyes, Allison had infinite potential that needed constant nurturing and support. I was seen as utilitarian, a workhorse who didn't need encouragement because I would succeed anyway, or if I didn't, it didn't matter much. The irony is that this neglect forced me to become fiercely independent and resourceful. While my sister floundered from one half-hearted venture to another, I was building something extraordinary. After college, I landed an entry-level position in the IT department of a small tech startup. I noticed a gap in cybersecurity solutions for mid-sized healthcare providers, an opportunity no one else seemed to recognize. I worked nights and weekends developing a proprietary security protocol that addressed this specific need. 6 months of sleepless nights later, I had a prototype that worked better than anything on the market. I pitched my idea to several investors using my mother's maiden name, Wells, as my professional surname. I didn't want my success connected to my family until I was ready. The third venture capital firm I approached offered seed funding, and Hazewell Security Systems was born. The growth was staggering. Within 3 years, we had expanded from 5 employees working in a cramped office to over 200 across 3 states. By year 5, we were valued at $500 million. As of last month, our valuation hit $1.2 billion, with over 500 employees in offices in 6 countries. I had become wealthy beyond anything my family could imagine. Yet they still thought I worked as a mid-level IT specialist at some tech company. Even as my company soared, my parents' financial situation deteriorated. My father had health problems that drained their retirement accounts. My mother's spending habits never adjusted to their reduced circumstances. Allison's gambling problem had emerged by her mid-20s, and my parents enabled her by constantly bailing her out. When I discovered my parents were 3 months away from foreclosure on their home, I anonymously arranged to pay off their mortgage through a complex series of transactions that couldn't be traced back to me. When my father needed heart surgery and their insurance wouldn't cover the full amount, I had my company's legal team create a clerical error that resulted in full coverage. When Allison's student loans went into default, I purchased the debt through a shell company and forgave it. They never knew. At family gatherings, I was still treated as the reliable but uninteresting daughter with the forgettable office job. My parents would casually ask me for small loans of a few $100s, never bothering to repay them. Meanwhile, they poured thousands into Allison's latest crisis, whether it was gambling debts, a failed relationship, or another abandoned career attempt. "Morgan doesn't need our help," I once overheard my mother telling a relative. "She's always been able to take care of herself. Allison is more sensitive, she needs our support." I maintained this exhausting duality for years, telling myself I didn't need their approval or appreciation. I had built an empire that helped protect millions of patients' private health information. I had a team that respected me, a beautiful home, financial security, but there remained a hollow space where family acceptance should have been. Last month, I received a surprising call from my mother. "We're planning a family trip to Las Vegas for your father's birthday," she said. "Allison thought it would be nice if you joined us." It was the first family trip I'd been invited to in years. Despite my better judgment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was a chance to finally connect, to be seen as an equal member of the family. I agreed to meet them there, booking my own room at the Bellagio rather than staying in the budget accommodations they had chosen. The first evening started pleasantly enough. We had dinner at a moderately priced restaurant which I secretly paid for by slipping my credit card to the waiter, and my father seemed genuinely happy to have both his daughters with him for his birthday. But after dinner, Allison steered us toward the high-stakes poker tables. "I've been practicing online," she announced. "I'm going to win big tonight, I can feel it." My parents beamed with pride at her confidence, as if gambling were an admirable skill. "You've always had amazing intuition," my mother said. "Remember to trust your instincts." I suggested starting at lower stakes tables, advice that earned me dismissive looks from my entire family. "Don't be such a downer, Morgan," Allison said. "Not everyone wants to play it safe their whole life." My parents nodded in agreement. I watched from a distance as Allison lost hand after hand, my parents hovering behind her, encouraging increasingly risky bets. "You're due for a big win," my father kept saying. "Double down." I stepped away after an hour, unable to watch the train wreck in progress. At 2:17 a.m., there was a pounding on my hotel room door. Allison stood there, mascara streaked down her face. "I need your help," she slurred, clearly intoxicated. "I lost $8,000. They'll kill me if they find out." "Who will kill you?" I asked, alarmed. "Mom and Dad," she clarified. "They gave me their emergency fund to invest at the tables. I promised I'd double it." I stared at her in disbelief. Our parents were living on a fixed income with ongoing medical expenses. They couldn't afford to lose their emergency fund. "Allison, this has to stop," I said firmly. "I can't keep enabling this behavior. You need help for your gambling addiction, not another bailout." Her tearful pleading quickly morphed into rage. "You selfish bitch," she shouted in the hallway. "You've always been jealous of me. I know you have savings. You never spend money on anything. You owe this to me." Her commotion drew the attention of hotel security and, unfortunately, our parents, who had been searching for Allison. When they understood the situation, they immediately took her side. "How can you be so heartless?" my mother hissed at me. "She's your sister. This isn't about love," I tried to explain. "It's about not supporting destructive behavior," my father cut me off. "We raised you better than this, Morgan. Family helps family, period." They walked away with Allison tucked between them while I stood alone in the hallway, the familiar feeling of invisibility washing over me. The next morning, I received a text from my father. "Family day trip to see the Grand Canyon. Meet in lobby in 30 min if you want to join." I hesitated, then decided to go. Perhaps the majesty of nature would provide perspective for everyone. I changed into comfortable clothes, applied sunscreen, grabbed my water bottle, and joined my somber family in the lobby. The tension in the car was suffocating. My mother and Allison whispered occasionally in the back seat while my father drove in stony silence. We were about an hour outside Las Vegas on a desolate stretch of highway when my father suddenly pulled onto the shoulder and stopped the car. "Get out," he said, not looking at me. "What?" I thought I had misheard. "Get out of the car, Morgan," he repeated, his voice cold. "You clearly don't care about this family. You've made that abundantly clear." My mother leaned forward from the back seat. "You can find your own way back. Maybe this will teach you about family loyalty." I looked at Allison, expecting perhaps a flicker of shock or concern, but she stared out the window, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "You're not serious," I said. "We're in the middle of nowhere. It's over 90 degrees out there." "You've always prided yourself on being so independent and responsible," my father said. "Figure it out." In a daze, I stepped out of the car. The moment the door closed, my father accelerated, kicking up dust that clung to my stunned face. I watched the car disappear into the distance, unable to process what had just happened. Reality set in quickly. I was stranded on an empty desert highway with no shade in sight. The temperature was climbing, already in the high 90s despite the morning hour. My phone showed no service. I had a half-full water bottle and nothing else. Standing on that deserted stretch of highway, watching heat waves distort the horizon, something shifted inside me. The last thread of hope that my family would ever see my worth snapped cleanly. In its place rose a cold clarity. They had left me to die, or at least to suffer severely. The psychological barrier I'd maintained between my real life and my family life dissolved. I reached into my bag and removed a slim metal case. Inside was my satellite emergency phone, standard issue for all executives at my company due to our work with critical infrastructure. I powered it on and waited for it to connect to the satellite network. "Jacob," I said when my executive assistant answered, "I need extraction, sending GPS coordinates now." His response was immediate and professional. "On it, Ms. Hayes, emergency protocol activated, ETA 40 minutes. I found a small outcropping of rocks that provided minimal shade and waited, sipping water sparingly. Exactly 38 minutes later, a black Escalade with tinted windows appeared on the horizon. It pulled alongside me and a security team member stepped out. "Ms. Hayes," he said with a deferential nod, "we have the emergency kit ready." In the climate-controlled comfort of the SUV, I opened the emergency case we kept for all executives. Inside was a complete professional outfit, toiletries, and a secure laptop. I changed in the privacy of the vehicle's partitioned rear section, transforming from a dusty, abandoned daughter into the CEO of a billion-dollar company. As I applied light makeup and secured my hair in a sleek bun, I made my decision. "Take me back to the Bellagio," I instructed the driver. "It's time for a family meeting." The black Escalade pulled up to the main entrance of the Bellagio just after 2 p.m. The valet rushed to open my door, recognizing the vehicle as one frequently used by high-value clients. I stepped out wearing a tailored charcoal suit, Louboutin heels, and subtle diamond earrings that cost more than my parents' car. I knew exactly where to find my family. The Bellagio's casino floor has a distinct section of mid-tier blackjack tables that attract people like my sister, gamblers seeking higher stakes than the basic tables but lacking the bankroll for the true high-roller areas. Sure enough, there they were. My mother anxiously watched as Allison placed another bet, my father checking his watch with a worried expression. They had clearly been hoping I would somehow make it back to Las Vegas and rescue them from their financial predicament. I stood silently behind them for a moment, observing. Allison had just lost another hand and was reaching for the last few chips in front of her. No one had noticed me yet. "Ms. Hayes," the casino floor manager approached with a warm smile, extending his hand. "What a pleasant surprise. We weren't expecting you until next month's cybersecurity conference." My family froze at the sound of my name. They turned slowly, confusion evident on their faces as they took in my transformation and the deference with which the manager addressed me. "Morgan," my mother's voice was barely audible. "How did you get back so quickly?" Before I could answer, the manager continued. "Your usual suite is prepared, of course. The CEO block is always reserved for your company's executive team. Will you be needing anything special for your stay?" The color drained from my father's face. Allison's mouth hung open. "Thank you, Michael," I replied smoothly. "I'm actually here with my family today." I gestured to the 3 people staring at me in shock. "Perhaps you could arrange a private room for us to talk." "Of course, immediately," he responded, signaling to his staff. Within minutes, we were escorted to a luxurious private lounge typically reserved for whale gamblers. Once the door closed behind us, the silence was deafening. My family seemed incapable of speech, staring at me as if I were a stranger. I took a seat in a plush armchair and crossed my legs. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about who I really am," I said calmly. "What is this?" my father finally managed. "Some kind of joke?" I removed my phone from my purse and pulled up a series of financial records. "The mortgage that mysteriously got paid off last year when you were facing foreclosure, that was me." I swiped to another screen. "Dad's heart surgery that insurance suddenly covered, my company paid." Another swipe. "Allison's student loans that got forgiven, I bought the debt." My mother sank into a chair, her hand covering her mouth. My father remained standing, his face cycling through shock, disbelief, and then, most predictably, anger. "So you've been lying to us for years," he said accusingly, "pretending to be some nobody while secretly lording your success over us." It was such a perfect encapsulation of his warped perspective that I actually laughed. "No, Dad, I built something extraordinary despite having parents who never believed in me. I helped you countless times without taking credit because I still hoped you might someday see my worth without dollar signs attached." "But you," my mother began, "left me in the desert to die," I finished for her. "Yes, I'd say that was the final straw. Allison, ever the opportunist, was the first to try to pivot. Morgan, I had no idea they were going to do that. I would have stopped them." "Don't," I cut her off. "I saw your face, you were smiling." The conversation that followed was unlike any we'd ever had as a family. For the first time, I didn't soften my words or minimize their behavior. I laid out 34 years of favoritism, neglect, and emotional abandonment. I detailed the millions I'd made and the millions more I would make, all while they treated me as an afterthought. My mother tried to justify their behavior. "We were harder on you because we knew you could handle it," she said through tears. "Allison needed more support." "That's not parenting," I interrupted. "That's lazy favoritism. You didn't push me to excel, you ignored my achievements while rewarding Allison's failures." My father attempted anger. "If you're so successful, why did you hide it from us? Were you planning to hold this over our heads eventually?" "I hid it because I knew the moment you discovered my success, I'd cease being your daughter and become your bank," I replied, "which is exactly what's happening right now." The conversation circled for hours. Accusations, justifications, tears, anger, a lifetime of dysfunctional family dynamics played out in a luxury room while casino noise filtered faintly through the walls. Finally, I stood up. "Here's what's going to happen now. I'm giving you a choice: a relationship with me on new terms or no relationship at all." I outlined my conditions: family therapy, gambling addiction treatment for Allison, and financial independence for my parents. No more bailouts, no more enabling. "This is extortion," my father sputtered. "No," I replied calmly. "This is boundary. For the first time in my life, I'm setting terms for how I'll allow myself to be treated by my family." I left them in that room to discuss their options, retreating to my suite with a strange mixture of vindication and sorrow. I hadn't wanted revenge. I had wanted my family back, a real family that saw me for who I was and valued me accordingly, but I realized that might never be possible. Late that night, there was a knock at my door. All three stood there, looking smaller somehow. "We'll try," my father said simply. "Your terms, we'll try." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. The months that followed were difficult for everyone. My parents, forced to live within their means for the first time in decades, struggled to adjust. My father, at 58, took a part-time job as a consultant for a small business. My mother resented having to budget and plan, skills she'd never developed. Allison's withdrawal from gambling was physical as well as emotional. She spent 3 weeks in a specialized treatment facility before beginning outpatient therapy. I maintained firm boundaries while offering emotional support where appropriate. We began family therapy sessions, awkward at first but gradually becoming more honest. Old wounds were reopened, examined, and slowly began to heal. 6 months after the desert incident, I invited my family to dinner at my home, a modern mansion overlooking the Pacific that none of them had ever seen before. My father, now working regularly and finding purpose in mentoring young professionals, arrived with a bottle of wine he had selected carefully, if inexpensively. "Your home is beautiful," he said simply, the first genuine compliment he had given me in years. My mother, who had enrolled in community college courses to develop bookkeeping skills, asked thoughtful questions about my company and seemed to actually listen to the answers. Allison, 90 days sober from gambling, was quieter than I'd ever seen her, observing rather than demanding attention. "I have an interview next week," she mentioned during dinner. "Nothing fancy, just administrative work at a doctor's office, but I think I'd be good at it." "That sounds promising," I replied, and meant it. A year after being abandoned in the desert, we gathered for Thanksgiving at my home. The dynamic between us had shifted fundamentally. My parents had learned to see me, really see me, perhaps for the first time. Allison and I were developing a tentative friendship based on who we actually were, not the roles we'd been assigned as children. As we sat around the table, my father raised his glass. To Morgan, he said, his voice thick with emotion, who had the courage to break us so we could rebuild. The road to healing wasn't smooth or straight. There were setbacks, arguments, old patterns that emerged under stress, but something fundamental had changed the day they left me in the desert. Sometimes the people who hurt you most can change the most, not because they want to, but because they have to. The desert wasn't an ending, it was the beginning we all needed to finally see the truth that had been buried under years of dysfunction. They abandoned me in the Nevada desert, leaving me to find my own way home. In doing so, they forced me to show them exactly who I had become, not the invisible daughter, but a woman of power who would no longer accept being unseen.